Your daily fix of women's mixed martial arts from the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. Be in the loop, cause Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your fix of women's MMA with Got You Covered on Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel De Leon, and we are nearing Christmas time. Yay! We are December, the final month of the year of 2020. It's been hard, but we are going to end out 2020 with the best time of the year, that is the holidays. I hope everyone's day is going well, whether you live in the States or internationally. Although 2020 has been very, very difficult, I hope all of you guys are having a great day today. And so for today's podcast here, I'll be talking about two very fun fights coming in from one championship, one of the best fights I've seen of the year. One of them being B. Nguyen against Jihin Radwan, and also Ritu Falgod versus Joe Mary Torres. These two fights are coming in from one championship, and later today I'll be discussing the main event from Bellator. And so, first fight of the night, we're discussing Ritu Falgod versus Joe Mary Torres. Obviously, me being the Filipino Californian I am biased. Alright? I'll be supporting any Filipino fighter I see, any Filipino celebrity I see. I gotta support them, alright? I gotta support him, gotta go show some love. But Joe Mary Torres here, this bout coming in, this is MMA bouts in the atomweight division, because as a reminder, one championships, they have, the way how they schedule their belts and their competition is very, very different, in the sense that they have the regular MMA style belts, and then they have kickboxing belts. And in this scenario here, this fight is under MMA rules, and in the atomweight division, also, unlike other promotions, the way how one championship, how their judges score fights, is based on accumulation instead of a per round basis. So let's say you won the first two rounds, and in the third round you just dominated. There's a real possibility that off you dominating that third round, the judges can be like, okay, you won the fight, because it really doesn't matter how well you do in each round. All that matters more is how you finish in the end. That's kind of the emphasis of one championship fights here. Now, that does kind of carry over, though, for the second fight I'm going to be talking about today, which is B. Nguyen versus Jihin Radwan. But let me talk about Ritu Falgod versus Joe Mary Torres here. Joe Mary Torres, Filipina, Ritu Falgod coming in from India here. And I'll put down my notes here. The 2 meet at the center with Torres winning in the exchanges, but 1 minute into the fight, Falgod gets a takedown in. She starts going from full guard, then goes on to half guard. Falgod is hitting elbows from top, but moves back to full guard position. So Joe Mary Torres, she is doing pretty well for herself, in the sense that she is preventing Falgod from being able to get into full mount for a certain amount of time here. Because there's a period where Ritu Falgod was constantly transitioning from half guard to full guard multiple times over, and Ritu Falgod really had to go work his way to trying to even get to side position here. I have seen other Ritu Falgod fights where it's the second she gets a takedown, she can seamlessly go into side control, then move on to mount position, or get to crucifix position here. Joe Mary Torres did the best she can, but she herself being more of a boxer, Ritu Falgod was able to go and power her way. Ritu Falgod, despite being an atomweight, she looks like she could be good enough to go compete at flyweights. I'm being very honest with you. Ritu Falgod has that Cynthia Calvillo vibe in her, in that when she goes full on aggro on you and gets a takedown in, she can out-muscle and outpower you, contrary to her actual height and stature. That's what I'm feeling about Ritu Falgod right now. Every Falgod fight I've seen, she is so much bigger, she is so much stronger, and it's obvious that once she grapples you or takes you to the ground, man, there is no way you can out-muscle or overpower her at all. So Falgod, she's constantly transitioning from half guard to full guard, trying to work her way up. She's trying to go and do some ground pound from full guard, not doing much damage, then a half guard. No, strange enough, she goes from a half guard at the left side to full guard, then moves to the right full guard, to the right half guard side of Joe Mary Torres, and at the right side of the half guard of Joe Mary Torres, Ritu Falgod is able to go put in some left elbow strikes and some ground and pound action onto Jo Torres. And I thought, oh my goodness, I don't think I've ever seen that. I don't think so, because usually when a fighter goes in for a takedown and they're defaulted to full guard position, they usually work their way up one side of the fighter here. Just one side. And what's really interesting about Falgod here was that she had all the patience in the world to be like, okay, so Jo here, my opponent, she's doing a really darn good job preventing me from getting to the position that I want. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing this time, except towards her other side. And we never see that. We almost never see it ever. Some fighters, like even like great fighters like Khabib and Daniel Cormier, great wrestlers, once they pick a side, they're pretty much committed to that. Like if they're on the left half guard and then they get pushed back to like normal full guard, they usually don't ever go off to the right side. They stick to committed. They are committed to that one side where they're able to go get half guard in, because they're like, okay, I want to go and get into this specific position here. What's really cool about Falgod here is that unlike many wrestlers, she is able to adapt and she's able to come up with new strategies into getting the position she wants. So she goes at full guard, full guard, half guard to the left side, go back to full guard, tries to go for half guard on the right side, raining some ground and pound strikes, and because she's actually raining some ground pound strikes onto Jo Torres, Torres is now positioning her body sideways in order to bring over her right arm to defend herself a lot more better, which leads to Falgod seamlessly moving in from right half guard down to full guard to left side half guard, and then slowly making her way up to side control on the left side. And I've never seen any other wrestler do this. And the second Falgod gets on side control, her being as strong and as powerful as she is, just muscles her way, just grabs onto Jo Torres, is like holding onto her, trying to put as much weight as possible onto her, making it difficult for Torres to go get back up. And then Falgod brings over her left leg, goes and puts it on the arm of Torres, putting her in her crucifix position. And unless you're incredibly strong or you're a great grappler, there's no way you'll be able to get out of this. Most strikers, once their arm is pinned down, is pretty much stuck in this position. So Falgod, she's got into crucifix position. She's raining down some strikes. Ritu Falgod starts to hit hammer fists over and over and over again. And it's pretty obvious from this point on, Jo Torres, she will not be able to go get out of the ground here. And there's still some time left. There's still like over 2 minutes left into the fight. And unless Jo Torres just eats these shots for 2 consecutive minutes, that ain't gonna happen, alright then. Referee breaks up the fight. Ritu Falgod wins the fight via TKO in the first round, and now she'll be competing amongst the top 5 of the atomweight division with her dominant victory. Now Ritu Falgod, one thing about the One Championship rankings here that I don't like is the fact that there are only 5 fighters deep into rankings. And it's not like they lack fighters, it's more of a sense of, here are the top 5 fighters, and here's everyone else. If you're not part of the top 5, you're irrelevant and you're not important, and you're pretty much all in the same position here. That way of thinking kind of applies to also UFC and also at Bellator, in the sense that if you're not a top ranked fighter in your own division, then you're pretty much just scrambling forward and you're just like fighting against random fighters, and then you're trying to do your best to make your way back up onto the top 5. If you're not top 5, if you're not part of the top 5, you're not important. That's how it is for UFC. That's how it is for Bellator. And for one, they emphasize that a lot more with literal, okay, there are no 6, there's no 7, there's no 8, there's no 9, there's no 10. There's no top 10 ranking, just a top 5 ranking. If you want to get part of the top 5, you got to go and win consecutive fights here. And this, I think, is Ritu Falgod's 3rd fight this year in 2020. And every single fight Ritu Falgod has participated in, she's dominated, she's controlled her opponents with her wrestling ability, and it'll be very interesting to see how Ritu Falgod is able to go and beat the atomweight champion. Angela Lee, who is the current atomweight champion right now, is a stellar wrestler. She is an elite top tier grappler, and I can guarantee you, Ritu Falgod has never faced anybody who is as good or as accomplished or as battle tested as Angela Lee. And since they both compete in the same division here, I'm guessing Ritu Falgod has to win 1 maybe 2 more fights in the women's atomweight division. If she can do that, then she'll go and face off against Angela Lee here. Now, if and when those 2 fighters end up squaring up against each other, I wouldn't know who would actually win that. I really wouldn't know. To be honest with you, I would say that Ritu Falgod might be the better wrestler. She's a lot more powerful, a lot more stronger. I could potentially see Ritu Falgod like muscling around Angela Lee though. But what makes Angela Lee very good though is that she is deceptively a very quick, a very technical, high-level wrestler. In the sense that I can pretty much see Ritu Falgod shooting in for a double leg takedown, because Angela Lee here, she doesn't go shoot in for takedowns, or she doesn't really shoot in for clinching or bring people down to the ground as early or as quick as Ritu Falgod do it. They're both grapplers, but the way how they grapple is very, very different here. One, Ritu Falgod here, she's got no confidence in her striking, man. She's got none. Ritu Falgod's boxing ability is very not that, it's not special. It's not all that special. It's definitely not elite. I've seen so many women's fights, even fighters who are unranked at one championships, and their boxing ability is a lot more crisper, a lot more better looking, and just is a lot more impressive to watch than Ritu Falgod. Ritu Falgod is a strong girl, but she definitely is not confident in her striking. And in the 1 minute striking with Jo Mary Torres here, Jo Mary Torres is winning. She's winning the striking, and Jo Mary Torres, her boxing ability isn't all that special also. So what Ritu Falgod does in all her fights is that she tries to strike, and then once she knows her striking isn't going well, which is almost all the time, she shoots in for a double leg takedown and just goes off her natural instincts of ground and pounding. Angela Lee, though, she is a lot more better in strikes. A lot more better. She was able to go toe-to-toe with the strawweight champion in striking. Angela Lee is obviously the all-around MMA fighter. She's more so of a complete fighter, even though, here's the thing, Angela Lee is only in her early 20s. She's only in her early 20s. Ritu Falgod, I think, is 26. Yet Angela Lee, she's at the very top. She is the atomweight queen right now for one championships. Some people might say she's the best women's fighter in one. Some might say she's the second best women's fighter in one. But she's without a doubt one of the best female fighters in the entire world out there. And she's only in her early 20s. That is insane knowing that. And knowing how far and developed Angela Lee is, considering her age, I will not be surprised if she goes and develops and become even more of a better wrestler than she is right now as she preps up and trains for Ritu Falgod if those two get matched up. So while Ritu Falgod is not confident in her striking, shoots in for takedowns, Angela Lee, though, she's perfectly fine striking and grappling with you, and she doesn't shoot in for takedowns, more so as she strikes her way into getting close up with her opponents, and then when things go wild, she can go and reverse the momentum of her opponent whenever she attempts to strike, and go in for for a leg trip or a toss or a single leg. Angela Lee almost never really utilizes any much power or any much strength in her takedowns. She does it so seamlessly and so quick and so smooth that it's strange to know like Angela Lee, contrary to her stature, can keep you on the ground for an extensive period of time. But, you know what, we gotta wait for that though. I don't expect Angela Lee to fight against Ritu Falgod until sometime end of next year. Ritu Falgod just got herself into the top 5 rankings right now, and the competition here is going to be a lot more difficult for Ritu. I'm right now looking at the rankings. Actually interesting. Ritu Falgod, she can definitely beat Mang Bo. Mang Bo is scary, okay? Mang Bo can one punch knock everything. Also, one issue with Ritu Falgod is that she's never really been tested in the chin. All we know right now is that she's always the aggro person who's always coming in. And Mang Bo is somebody, it's a complete coin flip on whether or not she can. That would be a really fun, how that will match up. If Ritu Falgod can defeat somebody as good as Mang Bo, then it would definitely automatically make her the number one contender for Angela Lee's title. That's what I believe. I think Mang Bo is a great enough striker that it's definitely gonna put fear into Ritu Falgod into really making her second guess her wrestling or takedown, because Mang only needs one shot. She just needs one shot, and she's a proper tank. And I believe that if those two were to fight, then it would be a complete coin flip on who would actually win that fight. I'll put my money on Ritu Falgod in that fight because Meng Bo's grappling ability is not all that well. Meanwhile, Ritu Falgod can develop and become a better striker. It's a lot more easier for Falgod to become a better striker as opposed to Meng Bo becoming a better grappler. But in the world of mixed martial arts, we really don't know what the clear future is for any of these fighters. All we can do is expect these fights to possibly happen one day and hope that they become fun and awesome to watch. You are listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. Come back after the short break here. See you soon.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info. Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back. I'm discussing one championship for today's episode of the podcast here. And one fight that really stood out to me which was one of the best fights of the year that I've seen, was B. Nguyen versus Jihin Radzuan in an MMA bout in the atomweight division. And so I got a whole lot of notes here. First off, Jihin is constantly throwing in leg kicks all the time in this first round here, but Nguyen is landing these heavy left-hand counter strikes. Nguyen is winning the majority of the exchanges here, but Jihin clinches and eats a lot of shots by Nguyen. What I like about Jihin here is that she does a thing that I just wish a lot more fighters did more often. In that, I see a lot of fighters here who are better off, what I like about Falgod though, is that she has no fear when she shoots in for takedowns. Same thing also applies for Khabib, in that, like, there are so many wrestlers out there who, if the fight goes to the ground, you'll be able to win the fight. Like, in the grappler versus strikers here, I understand strikers can knock you out, but if you just don't do anything, and you're sitting there with your arms up, you'll get hurt at some point. It's honestly the way how I see it, it's impossible to not get a takedown and not endure some damage. Alright? So for Khabib, for Ritu Falgod, for Jihin over here, when any of them go for takedowns, they're taking some shots in, alright then? Like, the second they get takedown in, they're going to eat some elbows from the bottom. They're going to be clipped with some uppercuts. They're going to get a knee up there happening. Like, it just happens. It happens, and for a lot of these grapplers, they have to risk it. It's impossible for a grappler to go into a fight and not to expect to endure some damage when they go in and shoot for a takedown. And that's what Jihin did. Jihin clinches with Nguyen. Nguyen, not even clinching back with Jihin, is just throwing out like body shots and like doing some dirty boxing, throwing in some elbows. But because Nguyen is more focused in on punching and handing the head of Jihin during these close range clinches, Jihin is able to find the opportunity to go in for a leg trip. But as Jihin tries to go and force Nguyen to the ground, Nguyen instead reverses the momentum of the trip and is instead the one who gets a takedown in herself. She reverses the momentum, she slams Jihin to the ground. Nguyen tries to go on mount, but then Jihin rolls over. Nguyen, for a short second here, gets onto the back of Jihin, but the two fighters immediately stand up. The two clinch with one another as Nguyen attempts a takedown, but this time Jihin reverses the momentum and gets a takedown in instead. The two proceed to reverse positions on bottom. Honestly, when they're both on the ground, both fighters really didn't gain that much advantage over any, like, they don't. I could safely say neither of them had actual ground control. When Nguyen was on top, Nguyen barely had Jihin on the ground. When Jihin was on top, Nguyen was barely on the ground, being controlled by Jihin. So really, during these grappling exchanges, I'm not going to give a score to anybody, especially in this first round here. Jihin does get on top, but is obviously trying to stand up, but Jihin has her on the triangle choke. Things are looking bad for Nguyen, but she escapes, then hits a hammer fist. Jihin powers her way through, uses the cage to get back up from the hammer fist coming from Nguyen. Both of them just keep trading shots until the bell rings. So, first round goes for Nguyen. And here's the reason why. It's because although I said that neither fighter really controlled their opponent in the ground, the difference between Jihin having control over Nguyen versus Nguyen having control over Jihin when they were on the ground was that when Jihin got Nguyen to the ground, she would immediately attempt a submission. She would attempt, whether it be an armbar, whether it be a triangle choke from the bottom, whether it be her going for a leg, going for a choke. Jihin was always the one trying to go for submissions, which contrasts Nguyen, because when Nguyen was on top, she was trying to rein in some hammer fists, rein in some elbows, and here's what I believe, if you attempt a submission hold, and you almost get it, note, you almost get it, that means you didn't succeed in it. You didn't succeed. It's a good moral victory for you, knowing that you are capable of almost applying a submission hold, but I don't think you should ever win a round or be seen as the victor of being you shouldn't be seen as a person who won an exchange if your submission hold was reversed out. That's what I believe. And we're gonna talk about the judges here by the end of this fight. But although neither of them never really controlled their opponent on the ground here, when they were able to get their opponent on the ground here, Nguyen actually landed some strikes and was able to daze and do some damage on her opponent. Jihin, though, she didn't do any damage at all on Nguyen when they were on the ground, but she almost cinched in a submission, and so Jihin does get kind of like the moral momentum victory going to the second round, but I'm saying Nguyen wins the first round. And let's not forget about this. Unlike other organizations, One Championships, they don't judge fights based on a round per round basis. They don't. They just base on accumulation, and now whatever that means is entirely subjective. Because there are some people who say, oh, this fighter won because they're the one ending it off they're the one who's doing best in the end, while some fighters feel like they should win because they did the best accumulatively from beginning to end. It's very subjective. It really is. And I say Nguyen won first round, even though me saying that really doesn't matter that much, but I believe she won the first round here. So Jihin actually wins a stand-up exchange in the beginning of the second round. As Jihin hits some Muay Thai knees, Nguyen gets a takedown in, but after 45 seconds, they stand up. And it was at this moment here, Nguyen was like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to grapple her. I'm just not going to do it, though. Because in the instance to which Nguyen tried grappling, she got kneed in the body here, and her grappling ability isn't good enough for her to be able to persevere and power through that and get a takedown in, unlike Jihin. So for the first minute, Jihin is winning this fight here. Nguyen does go for a left body kick, but Jihin catches the leg and gets a takedown in. Jihin is at half guard as the pace slows down. Jihin is able to go get a mount position. Nguyen turns over as Jihin gets on back mount and starts to ground and pound. Jihin hits a back elbow, then attempts a rear naked choke. Nguyen turns over and gets on top for a full guard. As they get up by the cage, Jihin clinches and lands a knee. Nguyen clips Jihin with a couple left hand hooks as the round ends. Second round goes to obviously Jihin. Jihin was able to go win in the stand-up here, being able to go land in some clean counters herself, getting some good clean Muay Thai strikes in, some knees, almost got a submission, and also on top of her trying to go for submissions and almost cinching some of them in, she was able to do some ground and pound with some elbows and forearm strikes from when she was on back position of Nguyen. So, first round, Nguyen. Second round goes for Jihin. Now, the third round here. So, for the third round here, Nguyen is being a lot more tentative in her striking. But here's the thing. Even Nguyen is being a lot more tentative the difference between Nguyen being tentative and passive in her striking, compare that to like Marvin Vettori when he was very tentative and passive in the third round when he fought against Jack Hermanson in the past UFC Fight Night event. The difference between that, though, is that unlike Vettori, Nguyen is actually doing some work here. She is. Sometimes you can be too tentative and too passive in the sense that you're just trying to find your shots, but you're so focused in, so dialed in on trying to find the right angled perfect shot that the volume you attempt isn't worth anything. And what Nguyen does here in this fight is that instead of being overly reckless and just throwing her arms out there, which is what she did in the second round, in the third round she was very smart in her strikes. She slowly picked apart Jihin, and in this third round here, there was no way anyone could say, "Oh, Jihin was the one who accusably was winning in the striking exchanges." In the third round. Now, in the third round, she was landing in some really good strikes, whether it be up kicks or push kicks or roundhouse kicks or landing in some good clean like right overhands. Yes, Jihin landed some really good strikes, but also Nguyen was landing more strikes. Now, of course, these strikes looked a lot less impactful than Jihin's like up kicks and like body kicks and head kicks and stuff. But even then, for every major hit Jihin was able to implement and attack Nguyen with, Nguyen was able to go and hit Jihin 2 or 3 times more so with her left hand. So, from a judge's perspective, it is very difficult to see on who exactly is winning these exchanges here. But from my perspective, I thought Nguyen was winning. I thought Nguyen was landing more strikes, was landing also hard strikes onto Jihin. Jihin landed the more harder looking strikes, but Nguyen still landed herself some really good left counters. So I put here, Nguyen lands a left hook, then shoots in for a takedown. Nguyen gets on mount and lands some ground and pound as the bell sounds. And the Mitch Wilson, who was on commentary, was like, "Oh my goodness, Nguyen can be able to, she can steal the round here in the third round." And so, in the third round, in the final 45 seconds, Nguyen is on top, hitting some ground and pound. Jihin is not defending herself. She isn't. She's not confused. She's not knocked out. She's not stunned. But it's obvious right now from their position, from this position here, Jihin wasn't able to go and defend the onslaught of ground and pound coming in from Nguyen, because Nguyen is squaring up onto she's at full guard, but she's standing up, she's squaring up, throwing in some vicious shots from top position in the final 45 seconds. Things are looking really bad for Jihin, but the bell sounds. Third round, in my opinion, goes for Nguyen. Nguyen did better in the striking, was able to get a takedown in, did some ground and pound action here. The one thing that Jihin was obviously a lot more better at than Nguyen was the grappling, but she wasn't able to showcase that in the third here. So I put in my notes here: close fight, very very close fight, and I was really unsure if Nguyen was going to win the fight, especially since after the fight happened, they started showing replays of the highlights of what happened in the third round, and they just kept showing Jihin throwing that high up kick and that head kick. So the judges' scorecards come in, and the winner by split decision goes to Jihin Radwan. And as the announcement was going on, Jihin didn't look all that confident in herself. Nguyen was like, "Oh yeah, I won this, man. I totally won." Like, she's looking at the camera, she's got her fist up, she's smiling. Meanwhile, like, Jihin looks indifferent to the fight. So when it was announced that Jihin ended up winning the fight, Nguyen gave the shocked O face. And the shocked O face is something that is hard for me to watch, because it's very upsetting. It really is. It happened to Michelle Waterson. It happened to Angela Hill twice, in the sense that there are fighters who look like they did a really good job in this fight, who many fans can say, "You know what? You actually won that fight." And Nguyen looked well. She was the one dominating Jihin in the final 45 seconds. She landed a whole lot of... The third round obviously was for Nguyen. Second one was obviously for Jihin. And first round could be a toss-up. But you know what? Some people say that even Jihin won the first round. So it is a complete toss-up on who actually won the fight. It was a very close bout, and I recommend anybody to go and watch this fight. It was a very close fight. I want these two to have a rematch. Both fighters compete in the atomweight division, and when you compare their skill set versus Ritu Falgod, who is on her way to becoming a top 5 member of the atomweight rankings here, I think these two need to have one more fight to go see who wins it, because it's very close. It was such a close fight that you could, if you replay this fight 100 times, there's a real possibility that out of 100 times, it could go 50-50 going for both fighters in terms of the win-loss ratios here. So let's have another fight here between these two. And ironically enough though, even though I thought Nguyen won this fight, I think Jihin would fare a lot more better fighting against the top fighters in the atomweight division. I definitely believe Jihin would do a lot more better fighting against Falgod compared to Nguyen. Because Nguyen, just like Angela Hill, for as tough as she is, for as exciting of a fighter as she is, with this no-nonsense, go 100% all the way through all rounds, through thick and thin, throwing out bombs, not being submitted, powering through the worst positions, Nguyen has kind of a ceiling. Sadly enough, she does have a ceiling, and unless she, she's still also young actually, if she continues on expanding her grappling game, because that was the only real weakness that was shown in this fight, if she can go and expand on her grappling game, I believe Nguyen, if these two were to have a rematch, could walk away and become the victor. I really do believe that. Now let's go from one promotion to another. I was going to be talking about the recent UFC Fight Night event that had Talia Santos versus Matana Del Rosa, but that fight got scrapped. So instead, we're going to go from one championships to Bellator 254. Main event is llima-Lei-Mcfarline versus Juliana Valasquez for the flyweight world title. Coming back after a short break here, you are listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. I am Arnel De Leon. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. And so I said there's been a lot of MMA action this past week, and although cards are shifting in and out, with for one, Bellator, UFC cards are being makeshift here. One moment you have one main event, next moment you have 3-5 cards. They're all being shifted, 3-5 fights being altered in the last second. So yes, although things have been kind of complicated in terms of knowing in advance what fights are happening, I was excited for this one. When it was announced, it was going to be Juliana Valasquez against llima-Lei-Mcfarline for the women's fight title, being the main event. By the way, isn't it awesome, by the way, that the last title fight in the year of 2020 for Bellator is a women's main event? And not only that, though, it was a very huge main event, a very integral one, because Judy Velasquez, she ended up defeating llima-Lei-Mcfarline and became the second ever women's flyweight champion in Bellator history. And when it came to this fight between Mcfarland and Velasquez, wow, dominant, powerful, strong performance. Coming to this fight, I believed llima-Lei-Mcfarline would be the favorite here, which she was. Mcfarland was the favorite going to this fight, and it really stood out to me. I can kind of tell who pretty much was going to win this fight immediately right after like the 2.5 minute mark of the first round here. And for this fight here, Velasquez, she is huge. She is a natural bantamweight competing at flyweight. Because when you compare both fighters side by side in terms of stature, in terms of how they dictated the pace of the fight here, Velasquez was significantly much more bigger than llima-Lei-Mcfarline. She really was. And one thing to know about this fight, though, was that, so we had two strikers here. We had two strikers. One of them was really good fighting in close and trying to go and defeat their opponents through 50-50 exchanges, which is llima-Lei-Mcfarline. And we had another striker over here who pretty much fights like the Wonder Boy Stephen Thompson fighting style. And I don't mean like the karate aspect. I mean being long, lengthy, has a very wide base to the striking. Because when you compare both fighters here, llima-Lei-Mcfarline, I don't know why many fighters do this. It typically doesn't work. Very rare occasions where the traditional boxing stance, where you're very bouncy and you're doing a lot of like horizontal movements. I've said this all the time in the sense that I believe fighters really should utilize horizontal movement a lot more. But in this case here, for llima-Lei-Mcfarline, she's doing a whole lot of horizontal movements and sidestepping for the sake of sidestepping and movements, but it's not leading to anything. It just isn't. Because in this fight here, Velasquez, she's very stationary. She's very stationary, and she's slowly progressing her way towards llima-Lei-Mcfarline. What Mcfarlane's doing, she's bouncy, she's always moving, she's more active than her opponents, but her opponent attempted more strikes. Like, I had a higher volume. And I'm thinking here, like, okay, Mcfarline, why are you so, like, why are you implementing so much movement into your stance switching, and she's also overexerting herself and being overly aggressive when she has to go on the offense. And I'm just right now questioning Mcfarlane's training camp here. Because some blame has to go for the fighter, well, some blame has to go for the training camp, because you're telling Mcfarline to go fight a certain way here. And what Mcfarline was doing, it was kind of like Rashad Evans, how he was always jumpy, and he was very mobile in his fight against Rampage Jackson. But, if you watch that fight between Jackson and Evans, for as jumpy as he was, didn't really do much in the fight. He really didn't. And, for Velasquez, with her longer arms, longer legs, with her wider base, she made it incredibly uncomfortable because here's the thing. What Velasquez did here, kind of like Wonder Boy Stephen Thompson, in terms of fighting stance, she spread her legs out, and then her right arm was extended outwards, and so if Mcfarline were to go pounce in for a strike, it would be the distance between Mcfarline and Velasquez was significant enough to the point that Velasquez will be able to go see the tell, and she will be able to like duck under or sidestep and go for a counterpunch. The commentary team were talking about that. They're talking about how it was very obvious and very easy for Velasquez to go and find the tells of Mcfarline, of when Mcfarline's going to go in and dive in. And if you look at the stance of Mcfarline here, her legs, for as jumpy as she is very closed, it's very tight. Her shoulders are very tight, leaning in close to her chest. And that almost never works. That fighting stance, unless you're trying to bait out your opponent, and you're like counter fighting, it works like that. But it won't work if you're the one who's being the aggressor here. And simultaneously, I don't know how this happened, but Mcfarline was like simultaneously the aggressor of the fight, who's trying to force herself onto Velasquez, but Velasquez is the one who's just chipping her away with a cumulative damage, and is the one landing all the shots. I give good praise there for Velasquez. She fought perfectly well. The only 2 rounds that felt like Mcfarline was doing well for herself was in the 4th and 5th round, because I don't get what Mcfarlane's strategy was going from rounds 1 to 3. 1 to 3, if you look at like the significant strikes totals, it was like 5 times. I say Velasquez landed 5 times as much strikes, significant strikes included, more so than Mcfarline. And Mcfarline here, she's all bouncy, she's moving horizontally, she's trying to be active, but she's being active for the sake of nothing. it means nothing. Like, because the fight stats and the eye test don't do so. I gotta like this, like, the fighting video games. If any of you have ever played a fighting video game here, and this mentality does kind of apply also for combat sports, in the sense that they're at a higher level in a competitive fighting game. You see players who are overly aggressive and doing movements and attempting things that don't lead to anywhere. They don't. Because we've seen this in other fights also, where the reason why a fighter is very active or very balancing the movements, or why their shoulders are very tucked in, is to lead to something. And for Mcfarland, she was doing all this stuff, shoulders tightened in, balancing movement, moving horizontally, for the sake of doing it. It didn't lead to anything. It didn't lead her to trying to find any angles onto Velasquez. And the best moments in this fight for Mcfarland was when she overexerted and was overly aggressive in this fight, but she was also like very tentative in asserting herself, if that makes any sense. What I mean was that her tells were very obvious, and then once her tell was obvious to her opponents, and Velasquez was able to go knock her with a counterpunch, the fight then resets. It's happened multiple times in this fight, where Velasquez is just standing still, Mcfarland goes in there, dives in for an overhand right, Velasquez moves over, counters with her own right hand, and then the process repeats over and over again. Or Mcfarland would go for a 2-punch combination, but she's only doing a 2-punch combination when she's moving in a vertical plane. So Velasquez was able to spot that. It was very quick and simple and easy for her to go and know what side to go duck under, what side to go dodge, when to sidestep, where the right angles are. Mcfarland's game was way too predictable, and in the moments when it actually worked for her, in terms of her diving in there and actually hitting that combination, she then resets back. It bewilders the heck out of me, and it was proven in the 4th and 5th round that when she is able to go and force Velasquez to participate in these 50-50 exchanges, fighting up close, and then her shooting in for a double leg or her clinching, those were the only times to which Velasquez didn't look like she was the one who was in complete control of the fights. Now then, Velasquez being a bigger, obviously much more stronger fighter, in that 4th and 5th round, yes, Velasquez was able to turn Mcfarland over around multiple times, was able to counter, and her grappling isn't better than Mcfarland. It isn't. It is by the 4th and 5th round, Mcfarland just accumulated so much damage in the fight that she wasn't really able to dictate herself and properly control her opponent onto the ground. So once again, congratulations for Juliana Valasquez. She fought a perfect fight against Mcfarland. I just hope that in Mcfarland's next turn-on fight, she goes on and fights just a wee bit better, and she goes on and makes adjustments. But yeah, congratulations to the second ever women's flyweight Bellator champion, Juliana Valasquez. And so before I go to the commercial break here, let me do a quick news brief here. So this is a personal dream match for me. This is coming in from SB Nation. BloodyElbow.com reported that Amanda Ribas versus Marina Rodriguez is targeted for UFC 257. This is being written in by Louis McKeever. Amanda Ribas already has a new opponent lined up for UFC 257. It didn't take long for the UFC to find a replacement for Amanda Ribas, as MMA Fighting reports that the Brazilian will now take on Marina Rodriguez at UFC 257, following Michelle Waterson's withdrawal from the Stride bout earlier this week. Michelle Waterson pulled out of the fight due to undisclosed reasons this past Tuesday. The new matchup hasn't been finalized, but Ribas and Rodriguez have both verbally agreed to fight. All that's left is for both fighters to sign on the dotted line and make it official. Ribas, who's 27, is on a 5-fight win streak and holds notable wins over Mackenzie Dern and Paige Van Zandt. The number 9 ranked strawweight is undefeated in the UFC and has only lost once in her professional career. Meanwhile, Marina Rodriguez is looking to rebound from her split decision loss to former UFC strawweight queen Carla Esparza at UFC on ESPN 14. She is 2-1-2 since making her UFC debut back in 2018, nodding wins over Jessica Aguilar and Tisa Torres, but fighting to majority draws against Rana Marcos and Cynthia Cavallo. It's understandable as to why Marina Rodriguez lost to Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza wrestling grappling ability is one of the best in the entire world. I'd say she's arguably the best wrestler among all women in the UFC. But this matchup here between Amanda Ribas and Marina Rodriguez, this fight, I will tell you right now, I know I keep saying this, but I genuinely believe Ribas and Rodriguez could be the fight of the night for UFC 257. I really do believe so. And in that card, it's expected we're going to see Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier as the main events. It's scheduled to happen on January 23 in probably the Apex facility building. Who knows, maybe it could be somewhere else. Her rumors that it could be in Florida, could be in Texas, could be in Fight Island. But I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, Ribas and Rodriguez, these two can pull out a great fight. I can guarantee you right now, by the way, that whoever wins this fight will get a performance of the night bonus. Do I think this fight is going to end by like vicious knockout? No. I think this will be a 3-round classic of two really stellar, amazing strikers going at it and pulling out a amazing performance. So in this fight here, I will pick Amanda Ribas. I'll say Amanda Ribas will defeat Marina Rodriguez, but do not count out Marina Rodriguez. This fight is incredibly close. When the betting odds do come out for this fight, I could say like 140, 150. Like negative 140, 150 in favor of Ribas, and then plus like 150 for Marina Rodriguez. It's that close of a fight, and anyone can win this. I am personally predicting now that Ribas is going to win the fight. Man, like their physicals are very similar in terms of how they fight and like their reach, their length. It's a very, very tight, close fight here. Ribas barely wins the fight against Rodriguez by unanimous decision. But although it is by unanimous decision, though, if you go look at the fight stats, I say Ribas barely edges out Rodriguez for each round. That's my prediction, and I'm excited to go watch it. And whoa, this is coming in also from SB Nation, written by Harry Davies. UFC flyweight Rachel Ostovich released by promotion after 3 consecutive losses. I am 100% not surprised about this. I am not surprised about Rachel Ostovich being cut from the UFC. It was reported that there were going to be 60 more cuts coming in from the UFC over the course of the next month. Rachel Ostovich makes the most sense, but I really can't be sad for Rachel. I really can't. She's got a really strong social media following, and considering there's Bellator, there's there's PFL, considering that I'm pretty sure it's going at 50% now, that 50% of Americans, in America at the very least, are being able to make money through more than just one revenue. And if you follow Rachel Ostovich on her Instagram, she is making bank through ads, through modeling, through doing sponsorships. She's going to be doing really well for herself financially, even after her cut from the UFC. And so I'm pretty sure Rachel Ostovich will do well for herself after this. And so coming back after the short break here, we'll continue on to the news brief portion of the podcast. You're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. Coming back after the break. See you soon.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome to the news brief portion of the podcast here, to which I talk about the ongoing news stories going on in the world of women's mixed martial arts. First off, coming in from South China Morning Post, One Championship Chatri refused to confirm or deny Ham So-hee signing, but promises amazing female atomweight for the Gran Prix tournament coming up. Chatri says, I did hear Sakibara was upset after Ryzen president claims Ham is heading to 1, but adds we've not made a statement. I'll just leave it at that. I have a quote from Chatri here saying that everyone who is part of the Grand Prix has either an unbeaten record or a solid record, maybe losing once. you're going to see it's very stacked. So this is being written in by Nick Atkin. Chatri Sayadong neither confirmed nor denied that one championship has signed Ham Sohee, but promised one more amazing female atomweight being added into next year's Gran Prix. One atomweight champion, Unstoppable Angela Lee, who is boasting a 10-2 record, is expecting her first child in April, but has vowed to return to the circle in late 2021 to face the winner of the Asian Martial Arts Organization's 8-woman tournaments. Former Road FC champ and UFC strawweight Ham vacated her Rizin Super Atomweight title belt this month, with the Japanese promotion's president Nobuyuki Sakabara claiming the 33-year-old South Korean has signed for one. Then here's a quote here saying, "I should be announcing the Atomweight World Grand Prix quite soon, definitely by the end of November. We're just trying to wrap up one more amazing female atomweight that we're trying to sign or in the process of signing," Chatter told SCMP MMA. "If we sign her, then we'll make the big announcement of who the ladies are. I think you just have to wait until our announcement," one's chairman added. When asked if the big signing was Ham, "I did hear Sakibara was upset. We have not made a statement. I've not made a statement either about what he was saying. I'll just leave it at that, but thanks for asking." The participants have not been confirmed yet, but the top 5 of the division, Denise Zamboiga, Meng Bo, Lin Hecken, former challenger Mei Yamaguchi, and former one atomweight Muay Thai and kickboxing champ Stam Fairtex, are feasibly well paced to be given a slot. The 21-year-old Japanese prospect Itsuki Hirata could also be featured, while also Killer B Nguyen, has been called to be included as well. Other notable names on the roster include Gina Young, but the Filipino is pregnant, while Lee's 16-year-old sister, Victoria Lee, is yet to make her debut after signing with one last month. By the way, can you believe that? A 16-year-old fighter in a major organization? Interesting, but whatever. Some of the female atomweights have not been announced at all. That they are not on our roster. People will be very pleasantly surprised, Chatri said. "I genuinely believe it's going to be the greatest atomweight Grand Prix ever done. If you look at the caliber, if we sign this one girl we're trying to sign, man, it's going to be a really stacked World Grand Prix." As for B, I really like her. I like her fighting spirit. Technically, she looks really beautiful when you watch her hit the pads or on the bag. Just technically so crisp, but she has struggled against that Fairtex and whatnot. I don't know if she's deserving of a spot. Now, this came in before the one championship fight where she fought against Jihin. Looking at how things are going on right now, I don't think Killer B will be part of the Atomweight Grand Prix. I would like for her to be part of it, but I don't think that's actually going to happen. Chapter continues saying, we haven't chosen everybody yet, but when we announce it, you will see that everyone who is part of the Grand Prix has either an unbeaten record or a solid record, maybe losing once. So, B Nguyen, I don't think she's going to get in. You're going to see, it's very stacked. That's all I got to say. Whoever wins is worthy as world champion and will definitely not be considered a rising star, but one of the best pound-for-pound females just because of the sheer talent you have to run through. One is back up and running with international events in Singapore, and yeah, it's the full schedule is out there right now on the One Championship main website. Chapter goes on to say, once we decided to do the Atomweight Grand Prix, we said let's try to get the very best in the world in Atomweight. We scoured the globe and started recruiting a few with great records and just really phenomenal skill sets, who we really believe could not just end up being Grand Prix champ, but also the world champion as well. But rather just announce it and go for it, let's make it a real, incredible Grand Prix. Early January, when it kicks off, the athletes have 8 weeks prep time for the opening. It's just about qualify. Could we have done it now? Yes. Yes, with the current roster, but we just said it. Who else is out there around the world who could really make this, bar none, the greatest female World Grand Prix ever done? So he's got a lot of expectations for this Grand Prix tournament, and when it does happen in January, let's cross our fingers and hope that it happens and things go well and COVID kind of dies down by January. Cross your fingers. Then prepare to see awesome women's mixed martial arts action coming your way. One fighter coming in with a whole lot of hype is Clarissa Shields. She's training in Jackson Wink MMA. Sky's the limit, coach says. This coming in from ESPN, written in by Mark Ramondi. Clarissa Shields has not wasted any time jumping into mixed martial arts training. ESPN's top pound-for-pound women's boxer signed with the PFL to compete in MMA earlier this week, and on Friday, she arrived in Albuquerque, New Mexico to train at Jackson Wink MMA with her friend Jon Jones, one of the best UFC champions of all time. Greg Jackson, the legendary Jackson Wink MMA coach, who has mentored the likes of George St. Pierre and Jon Jones, says Shields will be with the team for a 2-week trial period to see if she likes it. Now, Jackson is very impressed by Clarissa Shields already. He said Shields is one of the top 5 athletes with the most upside whom he has coached. He also said it was a little crazy on how she picked up things so quickly despite having no MMA experience. He goes on to say, if they bring her up right and she goes step by step and doesn't rush things, the sky's the limit. Literally, the sky is the limit. No, Greg Jackson, don't say literally, sky's the limit. No, just don't. But he goes on to say that she's so good. On her first day of training, Jackson said Shields already nailed the arts of the head kick, landing perfectly over and over for an hour. Shields, a former 2-time Olympic boxing gold medalist, is known for her punching power and athleticism in boxing. What will set her apart won't be just her athletic gifts, though Jackson also said it will also be her mind. Not only is she brilliantly smart, that is one of the strongest women I've ever met in my life. And I've met some strong women, Jackson said. Holy cow, is she physically strong. Just an insanely talented person. There are plenty of athletic people out there that aren't as sharp as she is. She's really, really intelligent. Then Jon Jones puts up a video out there of Clarissa Shields training in their camp. Jon Jones is very excited for her also. Jackson and co-head coach Mike Wicklejohn are no strangers to turning women boxers around and becoming champions, i.e. Holly Holm. They trained Holly Holm before she fought against Ronda Rousey. Shields, 25 years old, will fight in 2021 for PFL, but she will not be part of the promotion season structure. Instead of competing in one-off bouts, the plan for Shields is to fight in MMA at least twice next year with an eye toward being part of the season in 2022. Shields won't stop boxing either. She will do both combat sports at the same time in 2021 and perhaps beyond. Clarissa Shields goes on to say, I was telling MMA fans I'm not just a talker. Telling this to Brett Okamoto of ESPN, I know that's what they're used to, all these clout chasers out there. I'm like the real deal. Anything I say, I can do. I put my best foot forward and I do it. I'm not coming to MMA to lose. The next time they see me in the cage, I'm gonna have muscles coming out of my damn neck from training so hard to win. I am hyped for Clarissa Shields becoming an MMA fighter. Obviously, the 2 fighters they're gonna give to her in 2021 are gonna be gimme fights. They're gonna be gimme fights with amateur fighters trying to make a name for themselves, or fighters with losing records, or fighters with records that's not all that well. Probably gonna be fighters who don't really have a grappling background or an extensive grappling background. So Clarissa Shields should be given 2 gimme fights coming up in the year 2021 here. But the real challenge comes in on how good of a grappler will Clarissa Shields be in MMA? Because that's a big question mark, really. How will Clarissa Shields handle herself if and when she gets taken down? How will she handle herself if someone clinches with her and they're on the cage? How will she handle herself if somebody's attempting a triangle choke, or is in a backpack position, or is doing ground and pound? That's the real question here. Now, we've seen it many times before. We've seen wrestlers become really good strikers. We've seen Khabib Nurmagomedov. We've seen it in Justin Gaethje. But note though, it is easier for a wrestler to become a good boxer as opposed to a boxer becoming a good wrestler. And usually when boxers come into mixed martial arts, they're coming in learning grappling, learning wrestling as primarily a defensive tool. Kind of like Chuck Liddell. Like, Chuck Liddell can wrestle. The dude can wrestle really good, and he can throw in some good body kicks and leg kicks also. But you don't really know Chuck Liddell for doing leg kicks and for grappling. You know him for knocking people out with his hands. But what Chuck Liddell was able to do was that he was able to utilize his wrestling primarily as a defensive skill. And if they can train Clarissa Shields to primarily just be good at stuffing takedowns, from getting out of very uncomfortable situations on the ground when your opponent is mat wrestling with you, can Clarissa Shields develop the tools and the skills to do that? The answer is yes. But also remember, I found one video from Ramsey Dewey, And Randy was talking about that most MMA fighters are not athletically gifted. And when you look at someone like Khabib or Justin Gaethje, they're definitely not the best athletes in the world. And when I say athletes, I mean like how good is their high jump, how good is their athleticism, how good is their running ability. It is when you compare the type of athlete Clarissa Shields is compared to a Gaethje or even to a Carlos Esparza, to a Khabib, I say Clarissa Shields is a better athlete. But you gotta remember, Sage Northcutt than someone like Kamaru Usman. But we all know Kamaru Usman is the better MMA fighter. And so, for Clarissa Shields, she's got the athleticism. She's been a winner her entire life. She's got the striking ability. How will she handle herself when she fights against the elite fighters out there who can grapple with her, who can throw out high kicks? How will she handle somebody clinching with her and throwing out knees? How will she handle somebody throwing out leg kicks there? Leg kicks is something that a lot of people reference as to the reason as to why boxers typically lose against kickboxers. Because a kickboxer can just go and kick the legs of a boxer really quickly, and then the boxer's like speed and their positioning and their footwork just pretty much gets nullified. It gets nullified, and then they are incapable of adjusting and adapting themselves to the MMA game here. We saw it in the Israel Adesanya fight versus Jamal Hill, where we have two fighters who constantly kept switching between orthodox and southpaw and are trying to switch up their kickboxing based on the positions of their opponents. Boxing doesn't have that. Yes, there's like southpaw and orthodox switching, but not at the level or as complex as kickboxers do it though. And when you get to MMA, where there's just like more elements to the fight game, it becomes even more complicated. One reason as to why it was very smart by Paige Van Zandt to go into bare knuckle fighting championships is because Paige Van Zandt isn't all that good in the ground. She really isn't. And if you have somebody like Paige Van Zandt, who is primarily a good striker, have her compete in a sport where she's primarily just good in striking. And that kind of thing applies for Clarissa Shields, where she's primarily good in boxing, but we are unsure of how good her actual MMA all-around game is. Clarissa Shields has a high ceiling, high potential ceiling, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for Clarissa Shields here, but we're really not going to know how good she truly is up until she steps inside a cage. Her and Victoria Lee. Victoria Lee, still, her getting assigned to one championship at the age of 16, sky's the limit also for her, dude. Usually, at least in the States, when you go through like the amateur boxing circuit, you go through like a large like flurry of fights you gotta go through before you go pro. And the same thing also applies for MMA. You gotta go through the amateur circuit in MMA before you go pro. For Clarissa Shields, she's like, you know what? I'm skipping the amateur circuits. I'm going full on pro. And for Victoria Lee, she's like, you know what? I'm skipping the amateur circuit also for MMA. I'm going to go full on pro. So both these fighters here with two very different backgrounds, fighting for two very different organizations here. I'm excited for the future of women's mixed martial arts. Things are only pointing up right now with a lot of young prospects, whether they be for the UFC, whether it be for PFL, whether it be for one championships, with Bellator signing in new fighters all the time from different organizations competing for their division. The future for women's mixed martial arts looks very bright, and I'm excited. I'm very, very excited for the atomweight Gran Prix because I miss tournaments. And I can't wait to watch it. And so that will bring us to a close for today's podcast. You have been a great, great audience. I am excited for the holidays, and all I gotta say is thank you. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you, please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Women's Mixed Martial Arts Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.